In today's session, we're going to be talking about just the overall organization of TouchStone. And then we're mostly going to be focusing over here on the 4 key functions. When I talk about the 4 key functions and the other tools inside of TouchStone, I'll discuss the functionalities, so how to actually do things technically. And then I'm going to also talk about strategically, what to be thinking about, how to do it, how to approach it, what it looks like when it's done thoroughly, things like that. All right, so let's get started. What you're looking at now is called the dashboard. And the dashboard is what you see when you first log into TouchStone. If you've set up control panels, you're going to see a control panel assignment right here under this control panel header. So I've got a control panel here for the manager of administration and finance. If the user is a manager, they're going to see this section here called management review. And in management review, each of their subordinate positions will appear. And then it also shows the employees' names. So I've got 2 bookkeepers here, Mary and Mike, and then 2 customer service people. Also, you see on the dashboard this area called public processes. These are processes that have been designated as public. And that means that they're processes that are company-wide information. They're the types of content and information that every employee in the business needs to know. And I'll be showing you how to mark processes as public. The dashboard is all about the using and the managing of your processes. So the dashboard functionality is where your employees, or if you're an employee on the phone now, because I'm sure there are some, this is where you would go to access your processes and use them. You may go here to a control panel, for example, to your control panel to be reminded of how to do work that you've already been trained in. So this is just a setup of a control panel. All these processes are the accountability of this position, the manager of admin finance. These processes are organized into groups, you see right here. Makes it easier to find things. So employees may come here to get information about how to do the work that they're accountable for. If it's a new employee, they may come here to be trained. So to learn each of these processes and how to do them. Employees may come here when they've forgotten how to do something, or there's a step or a form or some kind of document that they need related to a process that they have to have access to. They may come here to complete things like a checklist or a form. So I'm just going to go back here to the dashboard. The last session, number 7, is all about the using of the dashboard functionality. So we're going to get into some details about that. And all along the way, I'm going to be coming usually at the end of the session back to the dashboard here and kind of showing what we've been talking about over here and how it's related to the functionality and tools on the dashboard. You go all the way to the upper right-hand corner of the screen. There's a button right here called Resource Center. When I click that, it opens up the TouchStone Help Desk, and it opens in a second window. So this Help Desk has got user guides, which have a step-by-step for almost everything you'd want to do in TouchStone. There's some video trainings. There's strategy webinars that are in here. So all this content here is just giving you more information and training on how to, how to use TouchStone. At the top of the screen here, we have frequently asked questions. You can register for the live technical trainings, which you're in now, so you don't need to do that now. But I did want to point out this option. This is called drop-in calls. This is a session that goes on every week at Tuesdays at 11 o'clock Pacific time. If you register here, there's no obligation to come. It just, the Zoom will send you automatic reminders that the session's about to start. This is kind of a free-for-all. People can show up and ask questions. We may go over training topics. Sometimes we log into an account together and kind of look and see and give an analysis on how that account looks. So if you're interested in more training, just more time in the system, then the drop-in call is a great opportunity for that. And then lastly, here in the Resource Center, this is the support tab. And this is how you can contact us through this chat box. So I'm going to go back over to TouchStone now. Also in the upper right-hand corner of the screen here, this little person icon is your user settings. So you can go here, any user can go here and see their username and password and reset the password or reset the username. And then lastly, this circle icon here is takes you to account administration. So only administrators have access to account administration. This is where you set up users for your system, where you can set the user's access, where you can set control panels that appear on the dashboard. There are little help menus that are all throughout account administration. There's also detailed step-by-steps on account administration in the Resource Center. And we're going to have a session on account administration talking about how to set up users, how to restrict access, what kind of access people should have, all that great stuff. So now I'm just going to click back here on the dashboard. So that's kind of the general setup of the dashboard and these tools over here to the right. One more thing I want to point out before we get to the 4 key functions is the search feature right here. So this is just a basic search. If you're looking for a process, if you forgot if you put something in, if you documented something a while ago and then you can't remember where it is, just go and search for it. You can do a search all, you can search for something specific. So remember the search feature here. So I'm going to click over here on the 4 key functions tab, and then I'm just going to click the first function. So the 4 key functions is the place inside of TouchStone where all of the processes are listed. So this is where every process is created or listed and then organized into one of the 4 key functions. The 4 key functions represents your business as a whole. So if you were looking down on your business and you cut it into 4 parts, these 4 key areas represent those 4 parts. Guiding the business, which we're on right now, is for managerial, strategic, higher level processes. So the working on your business, the managing of your employees, training. So that's how we define guiding the business. Getting the business is all of your marketing, advertising, sales processes. So getting new business and everything related to that. Running the business is administration, finance, human resources, IT. We call this the support processes. So they're the department and also the positions that support the rest of the company. Doing the business is your operations or your service delivery. So depending on what type of business you have, it's how you fulfill your customers, either by delivering your products or services, producing something. So this is the 4 key functions and how we define them. These, someone's asking if this is written down somewhere. So a definition of each of the 4 key functions is over here in the Resource Center. So you can find that in the Resource Center. So within each of the 4 key functions, and I'm just going to toggle back to guiding the business here. So I can click each of these boxes in this folder setup to get to each one of the 4 functions, or over here to the left in the navigation, I can click here and get to one of the 4 key functions. I always know which one I'm on because it'll be highlighted over here in the navigation to the left. And then it's also highlighted here in the folders. Inside of each of the 4 key functions, you then have what we call sub-functions or categories is another way to view it. These categories are sub-functions. I have an example of one right here. This one's management. And then I've got all of my managerial processes listed under that. This next one down is strategy, and I have all my strategic processes listed. So these sub-functions or categories help you to organize your processes. That's the main purpose of them. They just help you to create a structure, a subject, and then list the processes under that subject. So right here, I'm just going to go across this toolbar row here. This first feature is called Edit Function Title, And what this does is it allows you to edit the getting, doing, guiding, running. So if you don't like that terminology, if it's confusing to you, if you would prefer something different, then you can change it. So here I just click where it says function title, and then I type in what I want to turn guiding the business into, because that's the function that I'm in. So maybe you just want to call this management, if I can spell, and then save. So now you can see that this guiding the business has now been changed to management. It's changed here, and then it's also changed here in the navigation. So it's fine to edit the function titles. What I would say about this is that I would suggest you keep the general theme of it the same as how we're defining it. Because if you, let's say you change getting the business to sales, and then you change running the business to advertising, well, you're going to run out of functions because there's 4. So if you choose to change it, choose something that, is similar to the way that we're defining them. There are some suggestions, again, here in the Resource Center on different ideas if you do want to change them, what you could change them to. To the right of edit function title, this is how I control the subfunctions. So if I hit the drop down here, first thing I can do is I can create a subfunction. I can edit one that's already there, or I can delete one. So super easy. If I want to create one, I hit create. I type in the name of my function and I hit save. The functions get added, the subfunctions get added to the bottom. So if I scroll all the way down here to the bottom, then you'll see my new subfunction down here. An easy way to see your subfunctions and to also to reorder them if you want to is to go to the right here and hit this expand collapse. So when I clicked that, now it's collapsed all my processes, and now I just see the subfunctions that I have. I can also reorder them from here. So I can take this and make strategy number 1, then I can make board of directors number 3. So I just dragging and dropping up and down to get the order that I want. Also, if I click on one, it's going to open just that one and show me the processes that are in it. So this expand collapse is super useful when you're first building this, because if you've got a lot of processes, then and it extends past the view screen, then you can easily collapse and see things. It also makes it easier, again, to reorder, because if I'm going to hit this again and it'll all open. Management is, pretty long set of subfunctions. If I wanted to take like even this one and bring it to the top, now I'm holding my mouse click down and I'm dragging up. And so, I can do it, but it's much easier if I just would have hit this and then pull this up. So this is guiding the business. Some typical subfunctions in guiding the business are what you see here. Strategy, that's a good subfunction for guiding the business. So your strategic processes, things you use to develop, plan for, guide your company. Board of directors or board end meetings. If you have a board of directors, even if you don't, it's this idea of having processes for how you're going to run the business is a good thing to start to think about. Management, employee management. I've actually got a duplicate here. These are kind of the same thing. So you can call it management or you can call it employee management. So all of the managerial processes for that for every employee. And then training, that's also a good one. So the subfunctions are completely up to you. But here are some ideas. And again, these ideas here that you're going to see as I go through, those are all listed out in the Resource Center. If you want to remember what I have here in this demo account. Going over here to getting the business, and I'm just going to collapse this so you can see my subfunctions. So some typical subfunctions here are advertising. So lead generation is another way to say it. How do you generate leads? What are all the processes, the methods, the ways that you generate leads? Once those leads are generated, they're converted, and that's sales or lead conversion. So this is another typical subfunction that I would see inside of getting the business. Marketing strategy. So all of your strategic marketing processes. Developing, creating a marketing plan, competitive analysis, sales management. So over here in guiding the business, we had overall employee management processes. Here in sales, you might have some sales management processes that are just specific to sales. And then if you're a business that does estimating, you could have an estimating subfunction like you see here. So generally, advertising, sales, marketing strategy, those would be the things, the subfunctions I would see in getting the business. To the right of that, let's go to running. And the same thing, I'm just going to collapse here. So here are some typical subfunctions for running the business: recruiting and hiring, so how you get and hire new employees, human resources in general, so all the policy processes related to employees, finance, financial management, which would be like the higher level finance things like budgeting, cash flow, IT or information technology, all of your computer processes, and then administration. So these 6, again, pretty typical for running the business. So for guiding, getting, and running, every business, irregardless of industry, pretty much needs what I'm talking about. Every business needs these types of processes. Every business needs to generate leads and convert them. Every business has strategy and management. It's here in doing the business where it gets industry specific. So doing the business is your operations, what you produce, what you service, and these subfunctions and processes are specific to that type of industry or the type of industry that you're in. So I've got a few examples here. So client service or customer service. Most businesses have customers, so this is probably one that would work for most industries. And here, production management, if you produce something and there's a management of that, then this is a good subfunction. Operations management, service management. Warehouse, this is just another kind of one-off example. If you do store things in a warehouse, then this is just a good example of a subfunction for that. Service delivery, if you deal with materials, material control. So this is kind of situated or an example of maybe a production or service company. Now, if you're a law firm, this is going to be completely different. If you're an accountant, completely different. So think about categories, think about your categories for your industry, and then make those your subfunctions. If you need help with this, if you're struggling at all with it, then send us a message through the help desk. And we've seen pretty much every industry known to man inside of a TouchStone account. So our people can give you some advice on some subfunctions that would make sense. There's no right or wrong to the subfunctions. There's a few things that I'll go over that are probably not the best, but for the most part, this is really up to you what these categories are. Moving on from subfunctions, let's talk about processes and how to add processes. So this toolbar item here called processes is where you go to create a process and to delete a process. So there's basically 2 things. You create one and you delete one, and those are both under the process header here. So to create a process, I hit create, and then I type in the name of the process. Just like this. I tell TouchStone then what subfunction it goes under. That's what this is. So I hit this drop down and I see my subfunctions that are inside of doing the business, which is the function we're in right now. You will see your subfunctions here. So choose the subfunction that you want to put that process in, and then you just hit save. So super easy. Then the process is added to that subfunction. When you're creating your process titles, here's a few techniques. First of all, format it like a title. So you see I've got the first letter of every word capitalized. So that's typically a naming convention. So first letter of every word capitalized. Name it like a title. So don't have it be a sentence or a phrase. If it's longer than 2 or 3 words, then you're getting into the describing of it more than the titling of it. And this is something I see frequently when people are first starting their accounts and they haven't really thought about this. They'll start to name the titles and they'll start to write it as a sentence. So if you have anything that looks like that in your 4 key functions, then go back to it and shorten the titles and make them clear sentences. This is the building of your 4 key functions is starting to teach you and your people about looking at the business as a set of processes, looking at the work that you do as a set of tasks, activities that create a result. But when you're not used to looking at it that way, you just see it as a bunch of work that's happening. And if I ask you to describe it, you're going to start talking, and in a paragraph later, I'm going to know what you're talking about. So we're shifting that around and saying all of those activities that you have in your head, they're called something. There's a name for that. So this is easy for some people and harder for others. So think of, my best advice is just think of clear, specific titles, name it. Try to name what it is. If you're describing it in a sentence or a phrase, the best thing to do is put in your phrase, go right here, and then choose that process, click it. And then right here in the objective, put the sentence or the phrase in. Resolve and learn from each customer complaint through the efficient follow-up and distribution of. So I'm writing it out here, and then look at that sentence or phrase and ask yourself, what am I talking about? What is the title for this? And then put in the title right above. So if you're the kind of person who thinks in pictures, it might help to write it out as an objective and then go back and say, okay, what is the title? Also, when titling processes, you want to start to consider what is a subfunction like this and what is a process title. So this is another thing that comes about that's a bit of an art when you set out to build your 4 functions. I'm going to let's go to running the business. So here my subfunction is, let's go to this one, human resources or finance. Then I have all the processes listed here that are related to human resources. If I made a process title and called it human resources, then clearly inside of that process, when I click on it like this, there's going to be so much in here, right? Because if I called this human resources, well, there's so much going on, so much work related to human resources, so many results. There's no way to like really document that from step 1 to step 20. So that would be your first kind of sign that you're going too broad with your process titles. So the subfunction or the category is human resources. And then all of the work, the processes related to that are the processes within it. So here's finance, same thing. Finance is the subfunction, and this is all the work that is related to finance. Now what I'm just said is pretty easy to follow, but it gets a bit tricky when you get down to the process level. So this process, for example, so I put this in on purpose just for example purposes, accounts payable. So the question is that a subfunction or is that a process? Is there a clear set of tasks or even multiple tasks from task 1 all the way to task 20 for how to do accounts payable? Well, probably not. There's probably multiple things that happen. So here, this is called a work plan, and I've got numerous work plans here. And each work plan has a step-by-step set of instructions on how to do that work. So this is check deposits. And here I've got all these tasks from 1 to 8 on how to deposit checks. All of this check deposits is a part of this process called accounts payable. Then I've got bank deposits, which is a whole nother work plan with a whole nother set of steps. Then I've got invoicing, a whole nother work plan with a whole nother set of steps. Now I've put all of these work plans inside of this process called accounts payable. I could have made all of these work plans processes. So I could have, instead of saying accounts payable, I could have made accounts payable the subfunction, and then all of these, the processes within that subfunction. And there really wouldn't have been anything wrong with that, other than the fact that it creates a lot of processes on your 4 functions list. So rather than having one process here, I would have 5 or 6 here, and then maybe 5 or 6 here and 5 or 6 here. So suddenly my 4 functions, which was 10 processes under finance, is now 30 processes. To me, less is more. I like things combined. It's just easier to find, easier to organize, but that's my personal take on it. You may like it to be more specific than that. You may like it to not be combined and to have all of these as processes. Again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. One other thing to consider related to this is that processes are linked to job descriptions. So I take all of these processes here in finance and I link them to the position on the org chart who's accountable for that. So if I have 6 work plans inside of accounts payable, and 2 of them are done by the bookkeeper and the rest are done by the accounts payable clerk, then I have to remember that I'm linking this whole process to both job descriptions, and then I need to designate inside of here who's accountable for which work plans. So that's another thing to think about when you're deciding if something's an actual process versus whether it's a work plan inside of a process. We'll talk more about this when we get to documenting work plans, but for those of you who have already started it on your 4 functions, you may have already encountered this. It's easy to move things around in TouchStone. So if you've created, 5 processes instead of having one with 5 work plans in it, then it's easy to combine them. If you're inside of a process like this one, open it. If I want to move a work plan out of a process and into another, so if I had 5 processes and each of them had 5 work plans, and then I decided I just want one process with 20 work plans, you click the work plan, you go here to this icon, move to process. And now I look for the process I want to move this into. These are all my sub functions here. Choose that process and then hit move. So by using this tool here, I can take work plans that were inside of one process and move them to another. Okay, so let's move on. Oh, actually, one more thing here, processes. You can also delete processes. So I choose processes, I choose delete, I hit the drop down, I see all the processes that are in the function that I'm in. So I'm in running the business, and I know that because it's bolded here and it's also highlighted here. These are all my processes in running. I go and choose the process I want to delete, and then I hit delete. Only administrators can delete. So you have to be designated as administrator over an account administration here. And that's a pretty big designation because that means you can go to account administration, you can set up users, you can restrict their access. It's somebody who's either the TouchStone power user or the owner of the company. So deleting is just reserved for administrators because once you delete something from here, then it's actually gone. So let's go over to the left here. Oh, sorry, one more thing before I move on to the library. Some of you may have noticed the coloring here, how it's different. So this is black, this is blue, and then a process that's just been, I don't have an example of one here, but a process that you just add is red. The coloring shows you the status of the process. So if a process is red, that means there's nothing in it. Let's see if I can find a red one. This one. So this process is red right here, and it means there's nothing in it. If I click it, there are no tools inside of it. It hasn't been started yet. The documentation hasn't been started. Once the documentation is started, so somebody puts a work plan in and starts to build it, or puts a checklist in and starts to build it, then TouchStone turns it blue. So if it's red, it's empty. If it's blue, it's got something in it. And then when you're finished with the documentation of the process, you can turn it black. So I go here and I tick off mark complete. And now this process will be turned black on the 4 key functions and anywhere else that is visible inside of TouchStone. So red has empty, blue means it's been started, and then black means it's complete. This is a little relative to deleting processes, because if you've emptied out a process or it's just a title, then feel free to delete it because there's nothing inside of it. At the end of the row here, there's a library. So the library is full of example processes. So there are processes that have content in them, and they're meant to kind of give you a head start and give you some ideas on the types of processes that you might need. Each function has its own library. So guiding, getting, running, doing, each have their own library. So make sure you click that function like we're in getting, and then go to the library. I choose the general process library, and then I'm going to see a list of all the processes in the library. These are grayed out right here because they're already in my account. So TouchStone doesn't let you, we don't want you to have duplicates, so you can't copy a library process twice. You want to add a process from the library, you choose the check mark next to the title. I would go up here and put it into its correct subfunction. So these are my subfunctions. So choose the subfunction you want to add it to, and then hit copy. And now I'm downloading that process from the library, and it's in my account down here. So with these library processes, make sure you go again to each of the subfunctions or key functions and choose the library. Now I'm just going to go to running here and quickly show you library, general processes. Now this is a whole nother set of processes related to running the business. So go to the library and download processes that you like. One thing I will say about this is when you download the library processes, make sure you go in and take a look at them and just make sure that they're what you think they are. So how I would analyze these is I'd select it. So this is new employee 60-day review. That sounds like a good idea to you, that you need a process for that. Download it from the library and then just go look at the documentation that's in it. This is pretty straightforward. It's got a document and it's got a form in it. Inside of a library process, when you see a document like this one, and then you also see a custom form, they're usually the same thing. We're just giving you 2 different formats for it. So it's for you to decide, do you like it as a document better than as a custom form or vice versa? When you decide, then delete the one that you don't want, so there's not a duplicate. So when analyzing a library process, take a look at the content and ask yourself, is this something I'm committed to documenting and using in the next 6 months, say? If the answer is yes, then keep it. Another thing to look for is this good enough that I could just edit it and make it my own? Or is it so far off from how you would do it that it's easier just to start from scratch? This is another place that people get in trouble, because you try to edit what we have and then you end up spending twice as much time as if you just would have started with your own. So the idea of it, like this process itself might be great, but the content we have doesn't suit you for whatever reason. So if you do decide that it's not something you're going to be committed to using in the next 6 months, say, or it's so far off that it's better to start over, I'd suggest that you delete it. So you go processes, delete. When you delete a library process, it puts it back into the library. So it's not like when you delete your own process, it's different. When you delete a library process, it puts it back in the library. So you could go next year and pull it down again if you wanted to. The problem with downloading everything from the library and just leaving it in your account is that it's just a lot. You know, if the 4 functions list is overwhelming enough, if you then add all of these library processes to it that you're not even sure what they are, then it starts to make it even more overwhelming. So I'd recommend just spending the time necessary to comb through those and get rid of the ones you don't want. Everything is drag and drop on the screen. Almost everything in TouchStone is drag and drop. So if you're ever thinking, how do I reorder something? 9 times out of 10, it's just pulling it up and pulling it down to reorder. Drag it up, drag it down. I can drag from within this this subfunction, or I can drag from one subfunction to another. So I'm pulling it here and then dragging it here. I can also take processes from one function and move them to the other. So I can reorder within a subfunction. I can reorder from one subfunction to another. And then I can also reorder from one key function to another. So if this process here, I decide I really want this in management, I'm just holding my mouse down, drop it on top of management. Now TouchStone's showing me my subfunctions inside of guiding the business here, asking me which subfunction does it go in, choose it, and then hit move. And now that process is taken out of this key function running, and now it's moved to guiding. So drag and drop usually gets you the ability to move the processes around. So some ideas, that's basically the functionality in a nutshell. I know I elaborated on a bit of strategy kind of things too, but more or less, this is all the functionality that exists for the 4 key functions. Pretty straightforward. Edit the function title, build and edit subfunctions, add and delete processes, download from the library. Super easy. People generally do not have an issue with these functions up here. What the biggest issue that I normally see in the 4 key functions is number 1, the titles. So the titles not being uniform, so capital letter of every word, and being a lot of times too long. So it's describing something in a sentence as opposed to just naming it. So look for those 2 things throughout your account. This generally happens too when more than one person has started to build the 4 key functions list. So you've had different employees in here kind of doing it, then it's going into their style rather than deciding on a normal naming convention. If you struggle with this at all, look at the titles of the library processes. They're good guides for you on what it should look like. You know, making things all lowercase or more often what I see is all capital. That's fine if that's the style you like, but then just make sure that everybody does that anyone who adds to the 4 key functions puts them all in that same all caps. Some ideas for going about building your 4 functions. If you've already built your 4 functions, use this as an opportunity to go through and just make sure that everything is still in alignment. So based on what you've heard about today, just spend a few minutes going through each of the key functions here and just looking at the processes that are there. If you look at a process and it's named weirdly, then fix it. If you look at a set of processes and there's a bunch of processes in there you don't even recognize, 9 times out of 10, those are the library processes that you downloaded 6 months ago, or maybe even a year ago. Any of those that you don't feel confident are good and going to be used soon, then go ahead and delete them. Just clean it up. Look at to see if there's anything missing. Look and see if you've got work plans or processes that could be combined. Just to tidy them up. So you're taking like results and putting them together into one process rather than having 6 or 7. So go through each of the key functions and just kind of look at it with new eyes. If you've had your TouchStone account for a long time and there are titles of processes that you don't recognize or you're not sure why they were even there to begin with, just delete them. People are afraid to delete things, I think, sometimes because you think you're going to miss something. If there's been some documentation started in the process, but you're just not quite sure who did it and when, just create a subfunction and call it question mark. It could just be as easy as that. And then take those processes and move them under there. Just move them out of your main area and just pull them down under question mark. So that's a way of organizing without this fear of, oh, I'm going to delete something that might be important. So use this as an opportunity just to look through what you've got so far and tidy it up. If you're just starting with TouchStone and you haven't done your 4 key functions yet, then here's some tips for that. Start one key function at a time. So don't jump around from one to the other. Just start like with getting the business. Next thing, do your subfunctions first. So go to subfunctions and create your subfunctions. Go over here to the Resource Center and just be reminded of the examples that we gave you. Put your own titles in, but build your subfunctions. Then start with one subfunction and go to the library and pull down processes from there related to this subfunction. So say we're going to start with advertising. I would go here to the library, general. I would choose to have advertising be the subfunction and go through and pick the processes that I think would be good ideas for my business in advertising, and then hit copy, and then go to the next, go to sales, same thing. So once you're looking at the library processes, then ask yourself what's missing. You can approach this in workflow order if that makes sense for your business. So I'm starting here with advertising. The phone rings and someone's calling one of your services. Where did they come from? How were they generated? What's the first thing that you do? Maybe you qualify them. So we need a lead qualification process. So go processes, create lead qualification. Okay, they're qualified, then what? Then we schedule an appointment for sales. So go processes, scheduling appointments, and then go to the next thing. So you can think about it in this workflow order. That typically works for getting to doing. So leads get generated, leads come in, they get sold, they get passed off to service delivery or production. Then they get brought into production, the materials ordered. So you just kind of go through that workflow kind of order. By doing this, you're going to highlight the top 20% of what you do. You really will if you think about that workflow order. And it does not have to be hard. Just think of the main things that happen, and the library processes are going to assist you. When you get to guiding the business and running the business, some of the finance stuff could be workflow order, because if something gets sold, then the money gets sent, then it gets deposited, then it like that. Or if it's your production or service, then there might be timed payments. And so you can flow some of this into the workflow and running the business related to finance. But then let the library processes guide you for what's missing in guiding and running, recruiting and hiring stuff, administrative, fill in the blanks with all of that with the managerial processes, and then the running the business processes. These are really the top 20% of what happens here too. All right. I'm just going to answer a few questions and then I'll talk about the process of the week. So someone's asking, can processes be duplicated in different functions, not just moved? So it's a good question. You don't want to duplicate them. So I'm trying to think of an example. Let's say we have a process called answering the phone. Let's keep it really simple. So there's a process called answering the phone. And when salespeople answer the phone, or when they pick up their phone, they're going to say and do something that might be different from when a manager in production does it. So, or it just might be the same. So we wouldn't want an answering the phone process inside of all of the 4 key functions. We would have one answering the phone process, and then that process would get linked to everyone's job descriptions over here on the org chart who are accountable for answering the phone. Let's do another example. If you have an example, type it in for me and I'll use your example. The key thing to remember here, which I think will answer your question, is that processes are linked from the 4 key functions to positions on the org chart. So here on the org chart, these are all my employees. And if just the receptionist was accountable for answering the phone, I would link that to her job description. But if not only the receptionist, but all the managers here were also accountable for it, then I would link that process to all 4 of their job descriptions. So you don't want to duplicate it. Otherwise, you've got the same process in each of the 4 key functions, which wouldn't really make sense. If I didn't answer your question thoroughly enough, let me know. Someone's asking what the P stands for in front of the processes here on the 4 functions. So I'm just going to go to one. The P stands for the fact that this process has been put in the public folder. So when you select a process, if this is highlighted, that will put the process in the public folder. So if I go back to the dashboard here, this is the public folder. Public means that the process is available to everybody who has a login to TouchStone. It's not like it is when something's on a job description and that person is the only one who has who can view the processes that are on their job description. This is everybody, everyone who logs in. So what's typical here are human resource processes like satisfaction surveys. This is a really good process, by the way, because you can have your employees go and fill these surveys out in TouchStone, and then you can run a report and see them. Emergencies and injuries, that's a good, or safety, or like a fire drill, stuff like that. Vacation request, employee handbook. Strategic things like your management philosophy, so people can go here and always read it and see it. I've seen some companies even put their strategic plan here in the public area, so it's like everyone can see what the plan is for this year. Software how-tos, like the CRM how-tos. So put things in the public folder that every employee needs to have access to. Sometimes people go overboard and put every process in the public folder, or a lot of them. If you've done that, then kind of back that out. Only put processes here that are really public. Things that you just want people to readily see or get access to them really quickly. Still put them on their job description, and just remember that they're going to go right here to their control panel to find everything they need to find. It's just one click. If you put everything here, then nobody really knows who's accountable for it. It feels like it's everybody. So resist that urge and just keep things public that are here. Okay. So someone's asking how processes get linked to job description. So I'll show you that real quickly. So the 4 key functions list and the org chart kind of come together when you link the processes from the 4 key functions to the boxes on the org chart. So to link a process to a job description, I would click the position. This is the bookkeeper. So this is the job description. These are the processes that have been linked so far. I go right here to where it says add existing process. Hit that drop down. Strategic and tactical are the 2 sections of the job description. Strategic is meant to be like the higher level work, managerial work, where tactical is technical work. Hit the sub-function drop down. So now you're seeing all your sub-functions. You're seeing mine, but you will see yours. Choose the sub-function that you want to add the processes from. Now you can think of this in subject area. So this is the bookkeeper. So most likely that person's processes are going to be in running the business. So I choose sub-function, select the one I want to add or multiple, and then just hit save. So now that process has been linked to this job description right here. Another way to do it, which is quick, is I'm on the process now. So we're on this process called key performance indicators. I can go here, it says link to job description, and then I can link it from here. I can also see what job descriptions it's been linked to. So I can see it's on these 2 positions already. So you either do it from the face of the job description, like we were just on through the org chart, or you click the process itself and you go here to link it. I have a few more questions, but just in the interest of time, I'm going to talk about the processes of the week that I'm going to highlight for those of you who have to leave right on the hour. So get rid of this one. I'm in guiding the business right now, and I'm going to pull this sub-function here up to the top so we can see it at the top. So I'm in guiding the business. And these processes that I'm about to show you have come from the library here. In fact, someone's asking, I'll answer this question while we're on this topic. Someone's asking where they can get all these processes. She was asking for something specific, but you can get them from the library, because there's nothing in my demo account right here that hasn't come from the library. So every one that you see here that you're like, wow, that looks like a good process, it's in the library. So since it's January, beginning of the year, and I think these are great things to do at the beginning of the year, I'm going to talk about these 4 processes here: strategic planning, key performance indicators, and then year-end checklists. Strategic planning is a strategic planning process, and this is the content for it. It's got 6 work plans here, and they go in sequential order. So you can watch the video that's linked in this one, read through these different work plans, and they have hyperlinks to other things that are here in this process. A strategic plan is basically your vision for the year. I think planning 3 to 4 years out can have its advantages, and then back yourself up into each year. This process and the tools within it allow you to do that using, the methodology and the templates that we have here. If that's too far out and too difficult to view in your mind, just think 1 year, just think 2 years. I think strategic planning gets a bad rap when people are planning for too long of a time period, and then it's like you don't see your progress towards it. It just feels like a waste of time. So do something practical and easy and straightforward. Just put together your plan for the year. Then there are tools down in here that help you to kind of put out your strategic plan in practical steps. So we have annual priorities. This is the template that you can use. It's built inside of TouchStone. You can use it here in the process. So here I have my strategic plan for the year, and it's written in a narrative. Maybe it's 1 page. And in that written up strategic plan, I identify my annual priorities. So this is just an example. We want to get our sales conversion to 80%. We want to increase sales by 20%. We want to hire 5 new technicians. So these are your key annual priorities. Then you take those annual priorities and you put them into quarterly goals. So if I'm going to increase my sales conversion by 80%, I'm going to start to work on that in Q1. What are the goals that I need to have that I need to put in place in order to make this happen? So maybe I need to get better qualified leads. Maybe I need to build a better training, a better sales process. Maybe I need to train my salespeople. So you list out these priorities here, and then you write out what the action to take would be. So you can see where this way of thinking about it is really taking something that it starts with a narrative and starts with ideas, and then condenses it down to really clear, specific things that you can do. And oddly enough, a lot of these goals, like the priorities, if you want to increase your sales conversion by 80%, you're going to have to work on processes. That's what I would say. You're going to have to train your salespeople. That's going to be a process. To have a better conversion rate, maybe you need better follow-up. Maybe you need a better sales process. Well, that's all process documentation. So the action to be taken a lot of times is go into TouchStone and start documenting that process, analyze it, talk about it. So this is the strategic planning process, and there's a lot more to it than just what I've highlighted, but I think that this kind of is the end result you're going to get to with listing out the priorities and then tracking your progress towards them. Another great process is the key performance indicators. So key performance indicators, I think, are good when you've got one for every key function. So here, guiding, getting, running, doing. These are key things that happen. They can also be seen as departments. This is getting right here, sales and marketing department. This is doing right here, operations. This is running, admin, finance, human resources. And then all this top level here, this is all guiding. So you can lay over these 4 key functions onto the organization chart. In the 4 key functions, this is by subject. Here, it's people and departments. So back to key indicators here, if you think about the 4 key function or functional areas, you would have key indicators for each. So here's an example. Key indicators, go back to this. So I've got one here, examples for finance, examples for human resources, customer service or client KPIs. So this process in the work plans is just going to give you like ideas for the types of indicators that you might track. You want to think really high level with this. So what is the way that you're going to be able to determine the overall result that you're looking for? So here's a doing the business example. So operations or production. Here we've got the indicators, employee retention, returns, defects, retention. So think about and don't do more than maybe 4 or 5. You don't want to have 20 because then that just gets to be just overkill and people, if you make it too difficult to track, then people will stop doing it. So think of the high level 4 or 5. Imagine that you're on the beach in Barbados and you have to have 4 reports from the 4 areas of your business. And each report has 4 or 5 indicators. And from those indicators, you're able to tell the general health of your business. You're reading it and you can tell what's going on in your business. So that's when you know you've got that high level indicator. Here's some marketing indicators done in the custom form tool. So this is the review period, sales conversion rate. Is it above or below? Comments, leads generated, comments. So this process is just giving you different ideas for types of indicators. And then you're meant to go and build a document or build a form here in the custom form tool where your people can go and track them. And then on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, you have your managers fill out these reports and they can do it directly in TouchStone. Keep it simple enough and easy enough for them to be able to do. Then you're going to start to get this feeling of what it's like to have your business throwing off numbers to you that allow you to tell the health of it, which is a fantastic tool to have. And then lastly, we have these 2 year-end checklists. There's one for finance here, and then there's an overall company year-end checklist. Why I like these checklists is they kind of just allow you to review the key things that you need to have reviewed for that year, and it kind of then sets you up for the next year. So here's just an example of some overall company indicators. All this can be edited. You just click it, and then I can go through and change any one of these or add more to it. So here's this overall year-end checklist for finance. Sorry, we're on the finance one. Your bookkeeper can go through and do this, your CFO, or maybe your accountant. And then I'm just going to go back here. And then there's one more, which is the year-end checklist for the business overall. So this is running reports, doing a financial analysis, review last year's revenue goals and look at what's going forward, create your strategic plan, review your organization chart, consider staffing needs for the next year. Process review, take a look at your processes in TouchStone. Some of this we talked about how to do today with reviewing the 4 key functions. Job descriptions, org chart, your budget, training. So these 2 year-end checklists are in the library inside of Guiding the Business. Any questions about that? I know we're right up on the hour. So a few of you asked things that I think might just be technical issues. So I'm going to contact you directly. Next week, we're going to be talking about the organization chart. So we're going to discuss how to use the organization chart technically, which is pretty easy. And then the majority of the time we're going to spend on what I call organizational strategy. So this is how and why to build your org chart in a certain way, what to be thinking about, how to build the org chart so it's a picture of your vision of the future, how to use your strategic plan and have your org chart be a representation of that, how to make the org chart, in my opinion, one of the most important management tools that your business could have as far as strategic planning, as well as employees' sense of the organization, training, all of that. So next week, I'm going to go through that. If you have the time and you haven't done a strategic plan, try to use that process and come up with just a one-page strategic plan. And then next week, when we meet and talk about the org chart, you're going to see how this really relates to your vision for this year and how you can use the chart to support that. So thank you for coming, everybody. And remember, if I didn't answer your question, then I will do it by the end of today. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.